Hello, this is a lesson about trills. It's an all levels lesson. So even if you don't know what a trill is, or if you're a very proficient player who has repertoire with trills in it, there's going to be something useful for you in this video. A trill is an ornament, meaning that it's something that enhances the music. Trills are two notes that alternate. Generally on the cello, we play one bow and our fingers go back and forth. If the notes are farther apart, we don't usually call that a trill. That's called maybe a tremolo or just fast notes. But a trill is specifically two notes that are next to each other. They can be a whole step or a half step. So there's a few different ways that we indicate them. We can just have a note that says TR, or you can have a wavy line after the note. Those are literally exactly the same. The only reason a wavy line is used is maybe to show you that you keep trilling. Particularly in this example you're seeing here, there is a tied note, and so the wavy line means keep going over the bar line, don't stop the trill. And you'll notice, so some trills have these two little tiny notes that you might call grace notes. When we have little notes that are not exactly part of the counting, sort of little, again, ornaments. They fall into the ornament category. These little auxiliary notes on a trill, when they follow a trill, they're called Nachschlag, which is a German word. There may be some other words, but that's the word I use. And I consider them to be notes that walk you out of the trill. So we're going to look at how to execute some of these. At this point, I'm going to ask you what you think is the most important thing about trilling. Like really, what is our goal? Once we understand what notes we're playing, etc., what's the most important thing about trilling? Most people would answer that question by saying, well, it's making your fingers go fast between those two notes. And I would like to suggest that the most important thing is rhythm. The most important thing is that whatever you play in your trill, that it has rhythmic integrity. And the number one problem I see with students playing trills is that they sound awkward because they don't have a really strong sense of rhythm. So that's the main thing I want to talk to you about today. I will also give you some little tips about doing your trills, but I want to mostly talk about rhythm. So this first trill, as I said, with just the kind of plain idea of a note, and you can count that for a couple beats. And that's not so hard to do. But what's hard to do is walking out of the trill and landing at the right time. So in this example, you'll see a half note and then that Nachschlag, and then my quarter note is on the third beat. And so I'm going to count that like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the way I'm going to work on that is to think first about what my rhythm needs to sound like without the trill and without the extra little Nachschlag notes. So that would be going 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to also work on it with my bow, changing the way that's going to go. You can kind of do an air bow on that if you wish, if you're going trill, two little notes up, right? That you're going to change to an up bow on that C. So again, 1, 2, 3. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the little extra notes in there. 1, 2, 3. Now, those little notes, if I don't put them in the right place, they end up sounding really, really awkward. So now I'm going to play them sort of non-rhythmically, and maybe you'll see what I mean. 1, 2, 3. That was like, I couldn't find my third beat because I started the little notes too soon. So where I'm placing them is I'm placing them on the and of 2. I'm going to break down my counting a little bit more. I'm still not playing the trill. 1 and 2 and. There's one place I can put the little notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then if I trill with that, a little tip is maybe do it without my bow. I'm going to just do the trill. 1 and 2 and 1, 3. I said 1. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. And I'm not worrying too much about how fast I'm trilling here. In fact, probably I'm going to try not to trill too fast. 1 and 2. And you'll notice that actually my Nachschlag, my notes that walk out, are slower than where I just trilled. 1 and 2. Because I want that da 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 to be really clear. Again, if I don't do that clearly, it's going to sound like my trill staggers, or I just won't end on the third beat. So this is not a very fast trill that I'm doing right here. If I were in a really fast allegro tempo and I was going like, you know, something 1, 2, I might trill 2 and fast. But you'll still notice that whatever's going on in that trill, the da-da-da is really clear as I come out of it. What I want to do with that then is look at a couple places in repertoire, and I'm going to use the Breval Sonata in C, which is something that I think is accessible for players with a certain level of proficiency. It's from Suzuki Book 4. There's also lots of independent editions that you can get for that. And this is often the first time people bump into trills. Before we look at those, though, actually, I want to say one other thing, which is when we do the trills, going fast is not what's important. Keeping your fingers light and actually high is important. I am also really, really loose with my thumb. I'm keeping my thumb off the cello. In fact, I'm kind of hanging it off. If I'm tight and I'm squeezing with my fingers, then I end up having like this, like very low finger action, squeezy finger action. I don't get very much dexterity in my hand when I do that, and so as I'm trying to be flappy light, that's a thing to maybe try. Take your thumb all the way off, let it hang, and I'm not even pressing down that hard with my first finger as I'm doing this trill, and then it's fairly easy to do. I'm also a little squared off with my hand as I'm doing that technically. I will be posting a PDF that has some additional exercises about getting your fingers fast, doing things like that. So you can go down and look at the link to the PDF, which is below the video listing on the YouTube page. And I will also have all of these examples if you want to look at, you'll go find your own version of the Breval C major sonata, but I'll put at least the examples I'm going to play. Okay, so let's take a look at this first example. As I said, this is often the first trill that people encounter ever when they're playing. And it comes at the end of the first phrase, the first line of the Breval sonata. So you'll see I've written 2 measures of music here. I will play those 2 measures for you, and then we'll talk about this trill. Okay, and so what my goal was on that trill was to make sure I finished on the third beat. I didn't do very much trilling. I did like 1 time around. Let's talk about this trill for a sec. This trill's written on F. Trills always go up to the next note, and they go up to the next note that's in the key signature. So that's this difference of, is it a whole step? Is it a half step? When I'm on an F, I happen to be in C major here, which has no sharps and no flats. That means the next note up in the key signature is G, which is a whole step. So that has to be a 2-4 trill, which is a little bit harder trill to do than a 1-2 trill, for sure. Again, I am squaring my hand, and when I say squaring my hand, that means instead of tilting my fingers down the string, tilting my fingertips so they're pointing towards the bridge, which is my normal way to play, I a little bit am pulling my hand, so now my fingers are more perpendicular to the strings. I also have my thumb lightly off the cello. I'm trying to keep my thumb joint really relaxed so that as I play this trill, and I don't need to trill that long, this is a 1/4 note trill. So again, I'm going to go back to my drawing board, drop the trill and the Nachschlag off, and play those 3 notes that represent this trill bar. And again, I'm doing it with the bowing that I want to use, which means up bow on my third beat. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to also start counting my 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3. Because what I want to do with that Nachschlag is I want to put the Nachschlag on the and of 2. You can put the Nachschlag faster places, you can put it closer to the end of the beat, but I think if you're not very advanced with your trills, you probably want to make the trill sound a little bit square because it's going to fit better in the beat. And of course, fitting in the beat is the most important thing. When you get better at trills, you'll be able to play them faster, and probably then you can put the Nachschlag later in the beat and play it faster. But for now, stick it on the and. So now I'm going to play the Nachschlag. 1 and 2 and 3. And you might have to practice that a bunch of times. 1, 2, 3. Slow. 1 and 2 and oops. 1 and 2 and 3. See, it's hard to do, right? It's tough to count and make your fingers move fast. So I think it's great to practice it counting out loud like that. I also think it's kind of fun for you to see me trip over my own tongue as I have trouble doing it because it's hard to do. Okay, then after you get kind of good with that, then you're going to put the trill on. And I am not going to try to trill fast. I'm going to go once around. So that means the notes I'm going to actually play on the trill are going to be F, G, F, Nachschlag. So I'm going to play 5 notes on my second beat. So in really slow motion, that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. And so the way that I tend to play this kind of a trill, if we want to break it down even more, is I'm playing a triplet, 3 notes, which are going to be a little faster than my Nachschlag. So if you really listen to it, you'll notice I go, my first of those 5 notes, those 5 quick notes, my first 3 are a little faster than the last 2. Listen again. So the trill was the part, and that's the Nachschlag. You can do more trills if you have incredibly fast fingers, or if your counting is very slow. So then I'm going to play my 2 bars together. Once I get good at this, then I can do the bar before it. And I'm not bothering to try to do extra trills on that note. That's enough. Okay, so then the next place that we get trills is a couple lines down, and we have 2 that are right in a row. And these are weird, and they're a little mysterious because for a reason that I cannot describe to you, they are written with 2 16th notes instead of little mini grace notes. They're exactly the same, and the trill is going to sound exactly the same as what you just did, where you did kind of a triplet, and then 2 notes of your Nachschlag, and that all took place in 1 quarter note. Same exact deal here. So these 2 bars sound like this. What I was trying to do before, where I was putting the Nachschlag, which was written as tiny notes, on the and of the trill beat, is literally what's written here. It's written like an 8th note and 2 16ths. 1, 2, and 3. And that is exactly how we played the other ones. So in other words, there's no difference between that first trill and these trills. Yet they look different. There's a difference because they're on different notes. These ones go up after the trill. Remember, I'm still trilling in my key signature. So that means C natural is going to trill up to D. So again, that's a whole step trill. And if I'm going to work on that, I would work on it without the trill first. 1, 2, and a 3. Another thing that's a little different about these trills that I can feel in my bow arm is I don't change bow after the quick notes. And so those are definitely techniques that you need to work out one by one to make sure that you have the coordination with your bow, that you know what direction that you're going, and you might do that before you add the trill. Then I add the trill, and it's that same thing. 1 triplet and a dum, and 1 triplet and a dum, same exact rhythm. I think a lot of playing trills is about hearing what the rhythm of the trill is. Okay, we're going to look at one more, and this is maybe the hardest one in this piece because it requires you to count while you're doing the trill, and you really, really have to count because if you play this sonata with piano, the piano is actually doing 8th notes while you trill, and this is at the very, very end of the piece, right before the final bars. So you can see it written here. There's a couple of problems in this. One is that the rhythm looks a little complicated. The way I like to talk about the first measure here is that it's going to be 4 counts in your bar, and that's the very last 16th. So I count up to 4 and stick my last note in. If I don't play the trill, that means it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so you'll notice what I did with my bow there is I picked it up and I moved it back to the frog. 1, 2, 3, lift. 2, 3, 4. So that might be the first thing that I practice. Unfortunately, this trill is on this D, and I have no fingers above the D. You have to trill up. You can't trill back. So that means I have to go to a different position. A lot of people do it in second position, which means trilling from 2 to 4. You can also go to third position and trill 1 to 3. So those are both options, and then you have to shift back for your Nachschlag. So let me play those 2 bars for you so you can see the complexities of that, and then I'll give you a couple more tips on there. 1, 2, 3. So one of the things you'll notice about that trill is even though it's written like a whole note, I'm going to change my bow in the middle of it because otherwise I'm going to run out of bow and the trill's not going to sound very good. So that's the first thing to just note. We almost always change our bow on this particular trill. Second thing about the trill is you've got to be able to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there again, we have the Nachschlag on the and of 4. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1. So you might practice 1, 2, 3, 4, and practice shifting. 1. So I'm going to practice those 2 bars without the trill. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just practice getting the Nachschlag in there rhythmically. And again, you might decide to do that for a couple of weeks before you move on to add the trill, because I think it's important to coordinate all those different pieces. And then if you do add the trill in, try to count out loud. Metronomes are also really great for this. You could count in ands, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And the other one last thing about that trill is you'll notice I stop on 4. 1, 2, 3. And that is the best way to get out of a trill like that. A long trill is to stop before you play the Nachschlag. Okay, so I hope these things have been helpful for you. I know that it's really confusing when you play trills. I'd love if you feel like this was more confusing than helpful. I'd love to see some comments or questions if you feel like you need some more help with trills. Good luck and practice.